You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as BITVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use BITVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your Apples and your Teslas and your meme stocks and your SPYs and VIX and everything else, and look a little bit farther afield. See what's going on out there in them there crypto hills, from a volatility, from a SKEW, from an OI, all sorts of fun perspectives. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network. Glad to see so many of you are having a ball there on the plus and pro side of the fence. Reminder, if you're not on the pro yet, we got a great new pro Q&A coming up tomorrow with the guy who runs all the options execution over there at Northern Trust. You want to hear how the pros, large funds, how high net worth individuals are actually using options right now, how they're structuring them and implementing them in their portfolios and in their funds. We'll tune in tomorrow. Should be a fun one there for our next pro Q&A coming up out there. And of course, however you listen live after the fact, pro plus on demand, however you listen to the shows, make sure you keep those questions and comments coming. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. Let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. I am pleased to be joined once again by our old friend, Mr. Simon Ho, the founder over there, CEO at T3 Index, a.k.a. the Spikes father. I guess we have to add now the BITVOL father to his resume as well. Mr. Ho, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been a little while.
It has been a little while. It's been since March. A little bit's happened in the world of Bitcoin since the last time you and I chatted, sir. Just a little bit.
Just a bit.
So which of those do you prefer? You prefer the Spikes father or the BITVOL father?
Either would do, but I guess Spikes has been around a little longer, so maybe that's more appropriate.
All right, we'll go with Spikes father then as we keep on rolling into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. A lot to get to in the world's leading crypto asset. But before we get to all the action on the screen today, and there's a lot of it, let's start off. Simon, it's been a while. It's been since mid-March, so it's nigh on 3 months, which is, I think, the equivalent in crypto years of about a century. So a lot has happened since the last time you were on. You were kind of just talking about BITVOL getting up and running. In fact, you had just done your first options trade, which was kind of crazy because you didn't even really have an underlying trading yet they had the options going. It was all OTC. It was very surprising, very fun, very interesting, I know, for a lot of our listeners. But a lot's gone on in the world of Bitcoin since then. A lot's gone on in the world of Bitcoin volatility and indeed crypto volatility since then. So catch us up. What's the latest in the world of all things BITVOL these days, sir?
Yeah, well, continues to sort of have a lot of interest in it. So people from all around the world have reached out to me about it, how to trade it, about data, which frankly has taken me by surprise. In fact, there's been no other product that we've developed which has had such a massive amount of interest, which frankly I didn't expect at all. So that's obviously good. We continue to work on our relationships. So, recently there was that crypto event that was in Florida that was hugely attended. And from there, we also got lots of sort of connections as well for people who are interested in volatility trading on these things. Our ETHVOL is also up and running. So, on our website, teacherindex.com, you'll be able to see both the BITVOL and the ETHVOL. It's quite amazing the difference between those two. You've got the situation where the ETHVOL is significantly higher. Not to say that the vol on BITVOL is low by any means, because it's still close to 100 in terms of the vol. So it's really interesting. We actually have an actual research paper that's been written, and we provided the author with high frequency data so they can put together a nice paper, and will be in a financial journal in a couple of months' time. So yeah, there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on. We're also thinking of maybe putting some of these indices in the DeFi space as well, which should be pretty interesting. It'll be a first for us.
Well, a lot to unpack there in the world of BITVOL. We'll get to ETHVOL in a second. A lot popping off out there as well. Coming into Showtime, we had BITVOL, which you can think of it, listeners, as the Bitcoin VIX, effectively measuring kind of what's going on from a volatility perspective out there in the world of Bitcoin. And just refresh our audience's memory, because obviously we've had new listeners join in these tumultuous 3 months here. Simon, you're pulling all this data from the options chains, correct?
We use LEDGERX as one, but we've got multiple sources. We felt that we need that redundancy just in case, one exchange was down for whatever reason. So yeah, we use multiple sources.
I like that. So it's not just the LEDGERX chain, even though I know you do a lot with them. You're also pulling from multiple venues. You see CME doing something similar with their Bitcoin reference rate. We've all learned in the past it's kind of dangerous to rely on a single venue in the world of crypto. So if you have multiples, it does provide you obviously more sample rates, more data to analyze there, and also a little bit more securities. Coming into today's show, we're at about a 104 and about a half out there in all things BITVOL. How does that compare to what we've seen of late? Well, the recent high we saw out there when everything was really hitting the fan back in May, around May 23rd, was right around a 160, 159 and change out there. And the high for the year was actually earlier in the year, back on January 15th. So Bitcoin was kind of just kicking it into high gear then. We got up to about a 171 and 3/4 back on January 15th. So lofty triple digits on a BITVOL level, but by no means are we at the highs of the year or even the highs of the last month and change out there. Simon, anything catching your eye as you look back historically on BITVOL over the course of the last year and indeed over the last month?
Yeah, the thing that really blew my mind the most was the volatility of Ethereum. So, of course, we built BITVOL first, and then with a view to getting the Ethereum vol index up as well. But I think the high in that thing was like 217 or something. Like, it's just crazy. I would never have thought that it'd get that high. And interestingly, we've done some trades, as you mentioned at the top of the segment, that there have been a few customer trades on the OTC space in this. And in fact, I should point out that there is an interdealer broker that is actually setting up a desk so they can trade, amongst other things, BITVOL and ETHVOL. So that's all pretty good. I mean, it just moves at such an amazing pace. Everything in this space seems to do so.
So what kind of trades have you been seeing? I know you had that one trade going up before. I got to imagine, given how much this vol moves, I mean, vol was kind of languishing there for a while, but I got to imagine there's got to be a lot of people loading up for that upside pop. Is that pretty much what you're seeing out there in BITVOL these days? Or are they perhaps doing a little bit of mean reversion and trying to fade it, dropping back down a little bit?
Well, I think based on the drop down that you just referenced there, I think it's the volatility is obviously a lot lower than it was from the peak. So we in the past have had things like people buy a call spread and fund it by selling a put spread, for example, on BITVOL or ETVOL. So that's the kind of trade I think that people are looking at the moment, just to help to fund the thing, especially now the vol has come off considerably. So we think that's probably not a bad idea given the pullback you've had in the level of volatility.
Yeah, until the sell-off really started kicking into high gear in mid to late May there, Simon, we had kind of an interesting recurring narrative here on the show. It seemed like, Bitcoin volatility had kind of been squeezed out for a bit. It was languishing. We got down into the high 60s at one point there, which is high for an equity. For Bitcoin, it's comparatively anemic. I'm curious for you. You've been out there crunching the data. You're looking at BitVol all the time. What was going through your mind as you watched Bitcoin vol kind of languish for a while there at a level, the mid to low 70s, high 60s, levels that we haven't seen in some time, Simon?
Yeah, it was certainly an aberration. If you look at the history of it, that was quite remarkable. But I think that's part of the interest that this engendered, this particular product, because it is so volatile. Yet, the people who make markets for us at the moment, they are associated with LEDGERX. It's called Ledger Prime, and the prices that you get from there are actually really pretty tight considering the volatility of the actual underlying index. So I was obviously pleasantly surprised, but certainly surprised at the bid offer spreads that they were showing, given the volatility of the thing. So right now, nothing surprises me. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of hard to be surprised these days. I was surprised maybe when those 30,000 calls that we were joking about actually paid out earlier in the year in January in Bitcoin. After that, things stopped surprising me for a while out here. Let's see what's going on. We've been talking about BitVol. Let's dive deep into all things volatility and SKEW and OI. Of course, all this data coming at you, courtesy of our friends over there at GVOL. GVOL.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Just had Greg on the show last week. It's always fun to get a deep dive into their analytics as well. So if you like all this, you like what Simon and I are talking about volatility and everything, gvol.io is the place to go. It's really one of the few games in town when it comes to quality analytics on the crypto derivative space. If you were to head over there, you could see stats just like this, the 1 hour vol out there in Bitcoin right now, hovering just north of the triple digits level. We're at just below it on our last show at 99%, coming in today's show about 105%. So Bitcoin back moving and shaking back in that 105% range. By the way, I kind of buried the lead here at the top of the show. We are seeing a little bit of downside action. Got so caught up in the vol, didn't even get the chance to talk about the underlying. A lot of downside, a lot of red on the crypto screen since our last show. Of course, the big dog, Bitcoin, leading the dance to the dark side, off nearly 7,500 handles from our last show out there. So on our last show, we were just a bit shy of the 40K level, 39,975. Coming into today's show, we're at about 32, almost 500 out there. So a lot of dark side on the screen out there in Bitcoin land. Since our last show, we did actually cross the 40,000 level to the upside, hit about 41,300, and we got about as low as about 31,700. So I haven't quite threatened to break the 30K level yet, but if this trend continues, that could indeed be something we're seeing pretty soon. And if that's the case, we might see people start coming in, flocking into that put wing, start bidding up some SKEW, just like we do in a nice equity. And then we might see this vol trend up even higher. We shall see. Speaking of the SKEW, let's see what's going on out there from a SKEW perspective. Last show was actually kind of surprisingly even. It wasn't really a market bid in one direction or the other. We were kind of hovering. Market didn't know where the hell we were going. Coming into today's show, not surprising, we're looking negative again as the overall underlying has looked pretty negative over the course of the past week. At about a negative 5.5 coming into the start of today's show. Open interest out there. How much hourly OI is open out there in Bitcoin options right now? It's ticked up a little bit since our last show, 157,000 on our last show, 160,000 this show. Again, not a ton of OI increase. The calls were at about 100,000 last week. They're at about 100,000 this week. I think they've changed by about 500 contracts. Most of that 2,000 and change coming really on the put side, ticking up from about 61,000 to about 63,000 and change. So again, not surprising. We've been threatening a lot of downside strikes of late. So puts are kind of where the action is. Speaking of where the action is, let's see where you folks are lining up from an overall options OI perspective. And once again, it's all quarterlies all the time. And June is the big dog, 69,000 contracts. That's up about 5,000 from our last show. DEES at about 29,000, it's up about 1,000. And September number 3 is at about 24,000, up about 2,000. So again, no love for July, no love for anything outside of the quarterlies out there in Bitcoin right now. Again, we saw the OI increasing. So we saw a little bit of notional volume increase, or notional value really increasing out there across the board as well. Last show, there was about 6 billion worth of options open on Deribit and about 7 billion when you add in all the other venues together. Coming into today's show, it's up about $1 billion. It's up to about 7 billion on Deribit and about a little over 8 billion when you add in everybody else out there. And again, volume-wise, I'm talking for a while. It hasn't really been a rock'em sock'em robots period. You might think it would because we saw some, decent sell-offs over the course of that period, but it didn't really drive a heck of a lot of volume. And that's kind of the same case today. Last week was kind of a shrug your shoulders week. The busiest day was about 732 million. That's a far cry from the days of mid-May when we were putting up 3 billion worth of notional volume a day out there. And coming into this week, it's kind of the same thing. It's light but steady, about 500,000, or I should say 500 million today, 500 million on the tape yesterday, 600 and change million on the tape on the 14th. So a pretty steady week, but nothing really outrageous lighting it up out there. Simon, are you kind of surprised by that as well? I've kind of been a little bit taken aback by that. We have seen some decent movements out there in Bitcoin and the corresponding cryptocurrencies, but we haven't seen a ton of options paper going along with this, Simon. Does that surprise you as well?
Yeah, it has a little bit. I mean, given the speed of the move and the stats that you've just given us here, I'm slightly surprised that volumes aren't higher, but maybe people are just taking a breather after all of the volatility we had recently.
You know what that means? It means you just got to get BITVOL up and running, sir, so people can start slinging some BITVOL to make up for this shortfall in the regular option, Simon.
Absolutely.
There we go. We got to get those OTC brokers, get them up to speed, get them putting up some paper out there. In terms of where you folks are lining up from an OI perspective, which strikes are hot and heavy out there right now? It's still pretty much the same as it was last week. Just the numbers have changed a little bit. The 40,000 strike, still number one, even though we're a wee bit away from that now. We were threatening it on the show last week. It's about almost exactly 10,000 contracts open, about 9,900. That's actually down nearly 1,000 contracts from last week. That's one of the bigger changes on the week, really, for the top 5. Number 2 is the 50,000 strike again. That looks a little bit more distant now. 9,600 contracts open there. That's actually up slightly, up about 400 contracts from last week. Again, not huge changes in our top 5 this week. The 100K, the par strike, still lurking out there. Still number 3 this week with about 9,500 contracts. Actually up slightly there as well. A couple of hundred contracts new OI on the par strike. So the optimism persists out there. Number 4 is the 60,000 strike with about 8,200 contracts. That's still unched. And number 5, finally getting a more relevant strike in there. The 20K strike with about 8,000 contracts. That's up about 700 from last week. So that's quite the gamut of strikes there, from 20K all the way up to 100,000. So kind of pick your poison. Wherever you feel comfortable lining up, there's something for you out there in the Bitcoin options realm this week. Unfortunately, not a lot of options going on, or futures really, at CME this week. A fairly light week, all things considered. The busiest day from the Bitcoin options front, about 56 contracts. Again, it's a big, beefy 5X contract. Everyone's kind of got its eyes on the micro contracts out there. The CME big futures, the 5X futures, again, similarly light week. The busiest day of the last week was actually today with about 7,200 contracts coming into showtime. Makes sense. We're seeing a pretty aggressive sell-off out there today. The OI, if you're wondering, it's about 8,000 contracts. So again, pretty light out there in the big futures. Light week correspondingly in the micro futures as well. 21,000 is the OI out there. The most active day we've seen this week is about actually today with about 9,000 contracts on the tape. And a lot of people in the crypto space are kind of excited with the launch of the micro Bitcoin futures over there at CME. You know, the big futures have kind of been the flagship, the standard bearer for a long time. A lot of people blame them for kicking off crypto winter because once they launched, you had a reliable means to sell it finally, as opposed to before. But these days now, that's a big contract. That's a 5X. It's too much for most of the retail audience out there. So a micro future is interesting. I know for a lot of the audience of this show, the micro options when and if they should come are even more interesting. So have you been paying attention to these micro futures like a lot of our listeners and a lot of our guests have? And are you also excited for the potential of perhaps some actually bite-sized, retail-sized contracts coming out of CME soon, sir?
It goes without saying that around the world, the sort of avalanche of interest that people have in crypto, that comes with the fact that a lot of the constituency in that is actually fairly small traders. So you've just got a lot of them all around the world, seeded everywhere. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that the small version, the micro version, is going to be far more interesting to people, just simply because the big contracts actually get quite difficult and not that divisible. So yeah, I think that it makes a whole lot of sense to have the small, and I think that will be by far and away the more interesting product that people will want to trade.
Speaking of interesting, you've been champing at the bit. I know you've wanted to get there, Simon. You're all fired up about ETH. So let's get to it. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Time to do it. Time to explore the rest of the crypto landscape. Time to dive into the altcoin universe. Let's kick it off as we are wont to do, exploring the top 10 coins from a market cap perspective. Remember, take the market caps with an overall grain of salt. The rankings, I think, have a little bit more merit out there. Number 10, it's Binance Coin with about just a little bit shy of 10 billion worth of OI. Number 9, Polkadot with about 16 billion. Number 8, everybody's favorite, USD Coin with about 24, almost 25 billion. Number 7, oh how the once ridiculous, then mighty, and now ridiculous again have fallen, DOGECOIN, down to a still comparatively ridiculous 27 billion worth of market cap out there. It's only good for number 7 on the list. Number 6, XRP getting crushed a little bit out there as well, down to about 66 cents, and that puts it down to about 30, almost 31 billion from an overall market cap. Number 5, it's Cardano, holding firm with about a 40, almost 40.5 billion. Number 4, Binance Coin, about 45, almost 46 billion. Number 3, Tether, staying glued there. Number 3 with about 62, almost 63 billion. Then we go to number 2, the smaller dog than it used to be, ETH, at about 224 billion. And number 1, the big dog, again, much smaller than it used to be, with Bitcoin at about 600 billion worth of market cap. We're talking about 1.1 trillion or so not too long ago. So that has fallen quite a bit, pretty much been cut in half from the lofty high days of 65,000 out there. You know what else has been cut pretty much in half is ETH. Remember, it topped out around 4,600, somewhere in that range. It was looking pretty robust last week as well. It was at about 25, almost 2,600 on our last show. Coming into the start of today's show was at a 1930, so it broke the 2,000 level to the downside. That's been an important level for a while. I know it broke it briefly a few weeks ago, but it kind of rebounded right back. I was mad because I missed it. I wanted it at around 1,750 or so, and I got busy as I tend to do with these shows, so I tend to miss it. But then it came right back down. Not exactly to that level, but breaking the 2,000 level yet again. Coming in to start today's show, we were at a 1930. It puts us down, 600, almost 630 handles from where we were this time last week. That's a big move in ETH land. Got as high over the course of the last week as about 2640 or so, and as low as about 1893. So not quite delving into the 17.5 range or so. Getting pretty darn close to it out there. So you're talking a rough week for ETH. It's lost about 25% of its value in just the past week out there. It's also putting up a lot of numbers out there just in the past 24 hours. Not talking the options and futures, just total overall spot in the crypto space. Talking about 31.6 billion worth of notional volume. So talking about 26% of the total cryptocurrency volume out there right now going up in ETH. So ETH getting a lot of attention out there. Simon, it sounds like even though you're the BITVOL father, you've been more intrigued by ETHVOL of late. So break that down for us. What's been lighting up your tape out there in the land of ETHVOL these days, sir?
Yeah, so that is quite extraordinary. So if anybody wants to see these prices, it's on t3index.com. But if we have a look at the ETHVOL chart, you can see it's remarkable. The high that we had was back in in May 19th, I think you may reference this at the top of the show, but that was a vol of 217.99. So it's just staggering. And if you look at the equivalent sort of point for BITVOL, it was only 159. So only 159. But, still, Ethereum is just, it's a beast when in terms of its price action. So something that's I guess it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Right? You can get exploded from too much volatility. By the same token, it also provides a great deal of opportunity. But unfortunately, for those, as you just mentioned, the Ethereum performance hasn't been that great recently.
That's putting it mildly, sir. It has not been that great. And we're hovering right now, listeners, at about a 123 to give you some frame of reference in the ETH vol compared to where we were at that 217.99 level back on May 19th. So not quite half of it there, but still pretty lofty out there in the realm of all things BITVOL. Looks like the low was back at around the 60-odd level we saw a few times there. That was back towards the end of last year. Ironically enough, we didn't hit those levels in the vol nadir that was heading into April and that kind of quiet period in crypto vol out there. Let's look at some of the metrics out there from an ETH options perspective, starting off on the OI side. As you might imagine, a little bit more ticking up out there over the course of this past week. The calls, 852,000 contracts open out there on Deribit now. It's up 47,000 contracts from last week. Puts, same deal, almost 600K, 596,000 open there. That's up 49,000. So actually equidistant opening on both sides. Usually when we see an aggressive turn to the dark side, might see a little bit more puts leading the dance this week. It's kind of even Steven out there. OI last show total was about almost 1.35 million coming into today's show, talking about 1.4. 2 million out there. And let's look where the expirations are lining up, where the action is. Again, just like we saw in Bitcoin, same deal in ETH. It's all quarterlies all the time. June number 1, 602,000 contracts. It's up about 16,000 from last week. Dec number 2, 287 contracts, 1,000 contracts open out there. That's up about 4,000. And SEP, just a tick under 200K. That's up about 1,000. So again, all quarters all the time. No interest, no love for July. It's all June. Let's see where the strikes are breaking down. That's surprisingly similar to last week as well. The number one strike open out there in Bitcoin land, still the 5,000 strike. 72,000 of those are open, and they haven't really touched that. That's pretty much unched from last week. Number 2 is the 3,200 strike, a comparatively more reasonable, if not exactly relevant, strike right now at about 66, almost 67,000 contracts, down a little over 2,000 from last week. And the rest of that top 5 is still the same kind of irrelevant strikes that have been dominating the tape for a while. The 400, 320 strikes, both of them with about 63, 62,000 contracts open. They haven't changed. And the 480 strike at number 5 with about 53,000. Again, that's kind of unchanged as well. So whoever has those on, whether they're verticals or just straight up owning those strikes, they effectively have the future, and they don't seem inclined to want to get rid of it anytime soon, even though, like I said, we have been cut nearly in half from, or more than in half actually, since our last show. Futures wise over there at CME land, decent action, not a ton going on out there today. The high was 2,574 contracts actually today, and the OI is about 3,340 for folks out there. And again, even though we're seeing a lot of action overall and some increases in the OI, we haven't seen a ton of paper on Deribit over there from an options perspective. It's kind of been, I guess you can call it steady. The busiest day over the course of the past week has been actually, again, the 18th with about 268 million worth of notional. That's even less than last week, which was 277 million. And we saw $1 billion not too long ago, back on May 19th, back when BITVOL hit its apex out there. We haven't really come close to that again. Maybe if today's action continues, maybe we'll get a little bit more paper on the tape today. But again, Bitcoin and ETH have been moving, and yet we're not seeing the commensurate options volume, which is a little bit surprising. And Simon, I know you're a big watcher of ETH these days. It's a similar story, like we said, in ETH than it is to Bitcoin. You know, we're seeing a lot of action. We're seeing a lot of movement. We're seeing the return of volatility, not so much with the return of a ton of options paper. Does that surprise you, sir?
I guess not entirely, no, because, I mean, just given the nature of these moves, I guess people are sort of somewhat more cautious at this point, you know, like it's this thing can really whipsaw around. And, you know, at the moment, let's face it, the volume on BITVOL stuff is not not humongous, so there's not a lot of ways for people to sort of get involved and protect themselves with that. So, and not altogether surprising. I think it's understandable. I think why these investors would be sort of stepping back just a bit for the time being.
Well, I know you're a big fan of all things DeFi and a lot of other products out there in the realm of altcoins. So aside of ETH, which is getting all the headlines these days, what else is catching your eye out there in the altcoin universe these days, Simon?
To be honest with you, it's an amazing space. I mean, the more that I look into it, the more I realize how little I know. Like it's so deep in terms of, and the DeFi space is the place that we're sort of exploring at the moment for putting some of our products together, whether it be perpetuals or what have you, or just tokenized digital assets or derivatives. That's really where we're focusing our attention on for the time being, just in terms of new product development. But certainly we're looking to get the BITVOL and ETHVOL listed on an exchange. I think that's just going to make it that much easier for people to be able to participate in it. But, these things, they happen at such a lightning pace. And also, as I said, the whole DeFi world is relatively new to me. We're just sort of exploring our options in terms of what products we could deploy in there, but overall, I just say it's completely fascinating. I just can't get enough of it.
Fascinating is certainly one adjective you could use to describe it. There are many that could be used to describe this space these days as we keep on exploring the altcoin universe. Ripple, like we said, taking a bit of a drubbing down, 22, almost 23 cents from our last show, back down to those levels we saw, pretty close to when it was languishing around the 40-odd cent. Not quite there yet. We're in the 60s now, but not that far away. Got well north of $1 into the multiple dollar range for a little while there. And then it seemed like it was going to perhaps break out and break free and get clear of all the baggage that's been hanging over its head. And now I guess it's getting dragged down with all the rest out there in the altcoin universe. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, similar story. Bitcoin Cash down about 141, almost 142 from our last show. Bitcoin SV down about 36 points from our last show. And everyone's favorite or least favorite, Doge, down nearly 12 cents since our last show. So no love for all things Doge, even though I think some of your questions may love it as we head on into your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Let's do it. Let's get to some of your questions. First up, I like this handle. It looks like Dodgeball, but it's questions about Doge. So maybe it's Dogeball, Dgeball. Let's call it Dogeball just for fun because it is the crypto show. He wants to know, maybe we need, this is up your alley, Simon, maybe we need a Doge volatility index given how much that thing jumps around. So I know you got the BITVOL index, Simon. You've been all fired up about ETHVOL. What do you say for our listener here, Dodgeball or perhaps a Dogeball? Is it time, dare I say it, for a Doge volatility index, sir?
It may be before it's time. I'm not quite sure. So this is obviously very interesting. This is not something that I paid a whole lot of attention to. In order for us to be able to do a Doge volatility index, which I am not against at all, I would be happy to do it. The question is, I have to ask you back, is how liquid are the options? Because ultimately that's the thing that's going to determine whether or not we can put together a robust index on volatility in Dogecoin. So yeah, any thoughts around that? Unfortunately, I don't know how much volatility or options activity there is on the Dogecoin.
Yeah, unfortunately, the options activity is virtually non-existent, Simon. So you may have a little bit of an uphill climb ahead of you when it comes to Doge. It's kind of hard to get people fired up about an option on an underlying that's trading sub 30 cents,
Right. Okay. Yep. Well, there you go. So yeah, clearly that's not a winner, unfortunately, for your reader who put that question through. Until we have a liquid set of options, unfortunately, volatility index can't really happen.
It's kind of like XRP. People keep writing in about XRP options too, and I tell them the same thing. The thing's, at least right now, again, it's sub $1 again. So it's kind of hard to get fired up for an option when the underlying itself is arguably an option as well. So yeah, Dogeball, Dodgeball, whatever it is, you kind of need some options to do the volatility index, at least the flavor that Simon likes to do. And unfortunately, there's some OTC. You can get anything OTC you want out there in the crypto space. You can't really call it deep and liquid, and certainly not something you could go out there and create an index off of. So for the time being, unless you want to just do pure underlying, That's not quite as much fun. So, yeah, you need some options trading. And at least for the time being there, let's go with Dogeball just for fun. Dogeball. Not so much there on the Doge front. Let's see. There's another one that's kind of up your alley here, Simon. This comes from Elliot. Elliot wants to know, can you trade advanced spreads like butterflies and iron condors on LEDGERX? Well, LEDGERX folks came on the show not too long ago. It seems like that appearance did prompt a flurry of interest, getting a lot of questions about what you can and cannot do over there on the LEDGERX platform. I encourage you to go kick the tires and light the fires over there for yourselves. They spell it out pretty clearly, and they did so when they were on the show as well. It's a physically settled contract, so the lion's share of the use case that they're seeing out there is covered calls, folks who are sitting on a fair amount of Bitcoin and don't mind dumping some of it at higher levels and using the LEDGERX contract to do that. So if you want to go straight up covered calls, LEDGERX is a great platform for you. If you want to do some protective type strategies as well, they also are viable for that. And they have decent liquidity around the front month at the money. It tends to spread out a little bit as you get a little bit farther away from that, which makes some of these multi-leg strategies you're talking about, like butterflies and iron condors, a little bit more challenging because you're going to have a lot of slippage on those on a platform like that. And again, it's not really their primary use case. Their primary use case is the protective put and indeed the covered call. But Simon, you're pretty well versed on all things LEDGERX because you're analyzing those options for your BITVOL. What do you have to say here for Elliot? What kind of advanced trades, quote unquote, can you put up over there, LEDGERX, sir?
Well, I mean, you covered it very nicely. However, what I would say is that the folks at LEDGERX are really zooming in on making sure that they have the best offering that they possibly can, and raising money as well to expand the product offering. So I don't think it's going to take too long before that they can offer more advanced spreads. But as you say, being a physically settled product, it does have some limitations. But I'm very sure that in the next few months, you'll find that there'll be a lot of novel innovations that will make it a lot easier for investors like Elliot to participate.
Yeah, they have some other things they're working out on their platform too. Like they still don't have auto exercise, for example. You have to go in and manually indicate if you want to exercise your options. So it's still a few things there that make it a little bit less retail friendly, even though the contract size wise is far more retail friendly than anything you're going to find over there at CME from an options perspective. And certainly when it comes to approved venues that you can actually trade Bitcoin options on here in the US, you don't really have a lot of options, pun intended. It's CME or it's LEDGERX, and that's pretty much about it, unless you want to take the risk of tunneling into Deribit with a VPN and with all the other issues that we've talked about there as well. So right now, mostly covered calls and protective puts, but I think they're going to, like Simon said, and I'm glad to hear he's optimistic. That makes me excited because it is, again, an approved venue for you folks out there to trade, and they have retail-sized contracts. They need to just kind of dot some I's and cross some T's over there, and I think this will be an interesting place for you folks to hang your hats from an overall options perspective. So not quite there yet, Elliot, but again, like Simon said, I think stay tuned. I do think there's more stuff to come over there in the land of LEDGERX. Unfortunately, that music means there's no more to come on the crypto rundown today, but don't be sad, listeners. There's more coming up throughout the rest of the week. Like I mentioned, pro members get access to that very cool pro Q&A tomorrow over there. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't joined us over there on the Plus and the Pro, go to theoptionsinsider.com/plus/pro to kick the ball down the road for yourself. /shop gets you to both of them as well, so you can compare and contrast. And you get access to that. You get access to the options oddities every Friday and a whole bunch of other fun stuff, the live throughout the week and everything else that you folks all enjoy. And of course, we're back here, Education Wednesday. For a lot of the listeners of this show, education, an important thing. I know a lot of you are new to the world of options. So if you have questions about anything we talked about today, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio, 2 great shows for you guys to sink your teeth into. Of course, Thursday, TWIFO on the Option Block. Friday, Vol Views. And for our pro folks out there, Options Oddities. And then we come back again on Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. But before we do that, Mr. Simon, if folks are intrigued, and clearly they are from their questions, they want to learn more about BITVOL or ETHVOL or anything else you guys got cooking over there in the land of T3, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Well, if you want to have a look at the ETHVOL and the BITVOL in more detail, then of course, please, you're very welcome to come to our website, t3index.com. At the bottom of that, most people don't really know. We haven't sort of advertised it all that much at this point, but we will soon. There's actually Ledger Prime actually makes options, put options and call option prices twice a day, which we update just so that people get an idea of what it would cost them or what they would earn if they were to try and trade a BITVOL or an ETHVOL contract. So those are out there. We're really keen to get feedback as well from people. So if needs be, please drop me a line. You can get on that at the website. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch.
There you go. You know where to find it. T3 Index, just the number 3. T3index.com is the place to go. You can see the charts for the BITVOL. You can see the charts for the ETHVOL. You can get a nice perspective of where we are now versus where we have been historically. And again, if you have questions, hit Simon up over there. All the contact is there as well. He'll love to hear from you. On behalf of Mr. Simon and our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, check them out. gvol.io is the place to go. And indeed myself. Thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in your questions. We'll see you back here throughout the rest of the week. And then back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.